Okay, sorry about that. The picture did not come up of the sea urchins releasing their eggs. But it's the same basic thing. So the sea urchins release the sperm and the eggs into the water where they fuse and form zygotes. If they are from different species, then they will not be able to fuse. So you have sperm and eggs swimming around in the water, and if they meet up with the correct species, they'll be able to produce. And so that's a biochemical barrier. The biochemical barrier is that the sperm cannot penetrate the egg because on the egg there are different receptors that allow the sperm to penetrate the egg and fertilize it. And then in some organisms there's chemical incompatibility, which as soon as the sperm gets into the female's reproductive tract, it will be killed. Okay? All right, so then the other type of barriers are called post-reproduction barriers or post-zygotic barriers, and that is when it prevents hybrid offspring from developing into viable, fertile adults. There's three kinds of this that we'll talk about. Reduced hybrid viability, reduced hybrid fertility, and hybrid breakdown. Reduced hybrid viability is the first one, and that's when genes of different parent species may interact and impair the hybrid's development. So that means that basically they try to reproduce, fertilization of the egg has occurred, but then those babies don't usually survive. So the mom would have what we would consider to be a miscarriage. The next one is reduced hybrid fertility, and that means that the fertilization from two different species has occurred, the egg has fused with the sperm, the babies have been born, and can be vigorous, healthy organisms, but they are sterile. And a lot of times that happens because the chromosome numbers of the parents are different, and then meiosis cannot occur, cannot give you regular gametes. So here we go. Here's the most common example that everybody knows of. You have a horse and you have a donkey come together to form a mule. So mules survive. They're used all the time for labor for people, but they're sterile. They can't have babies. The only way you get mules are horses and donkeys. And so then here's an example of the chromosome pair not being the same. So it's 64 and 62. So you have a weird number of chromosomes in those mules. So they're not able to produce not able to produce sperm and eggs. So remember that usually you get one set of chromosomes from your mom and one set from your dad. And so in this case, since they have an odd number, they're not able to produce their gametes effectively. Okay, then the last type is called hybrid breakdown, which is when hybrids may be fertile and viable, and so they get offspring. So the hybrid survives, it produces its own offspring, but then those offspring cannot survive. Okay, so it's a generation after. And so rice is, some of the cultivated rice is an example of this. Okay, let's talk a little bit about plants. Plants are a little bit different than animals because we can have polyploids of plants, which means many sets of chromosomes or a change in chromosome number. And so there's two different kinds. You have autopolyploid. Auto means self, poly means many, and ploid refers to chromosome number. So in this case, the species doubles their chromosome number from 2N to 4N. So 2N is how many we have normally. Humans have 46 chromosomes in their cells. So if we were to double that number, it would then be considered to be 4N. And that would happen because meiosis didn't occur and you had fertilization of two cells that had your regular number of chromosomes in it. Allopolyploid, allo means other, poly means many, still employed. So this is from kind of like the horse and the donkey example, but with plants because they can survive. So they form as a polyploid between two different species. So you have different numbers of chromosomes coming together. So they can reproduce with each other. So this is how wheat, oats, cottons, potatoes, and tobacco all came about. They're able to reproduce with each other, but they cannot reproduce with the parent species. So now it's a new species altogether. There are not any, there's only one or two select examples of animals that have been able to be polyploid. Most things die if they have an inaccurate number of chromosomes. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to touch on briefly is just the rate of speciation. So how quickly does evolution occur, basically, is the question. And so there's two trains of thought here. And is it gradually or is it rapidly? So gradualism is, a couple of scientists that think gradualism is the way it occurs is Darwin and Lyell. And then there's kind of a new type that people are really beginning to investigate, and that's called punctuated equilibrium. And that's Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge that kind of are working with this idea. So let's talk about what they mean. Gradualism is when you have a gradual divergence over long spans of time. So a gradual separation of organisms over a very, very long time. So in this case, you are assuming that big changes occur over time because you get really, really small ones over many generations. But each generation is a little bit different. Let's go back to this one for a second. Sorry. Okay, so here's your original parent species, and you can see how they've split off into two new species, and each generation is slightly different than the previous one on both sides. So that's gradually. So they are gradually changing to be very different from each other. Okay? The next one is called punctuated equilibrium, and that's when the rate of speciation is not constant. You could go for many, many generations and have everything be the same, then have there be some sort of environmental change that causes rapid bursts of change. So there's long periods of time with very little change, and then once they break off from the parent chain, there's rapid change in those organisms. So you can see how it happens at different times. So this, at first, it's going along and everything is the same. Then some sort of environmental shift happened, and this group broke off and changed very quickly. Then we had this period of time where you still had some of your original parent left, and then another environmental change occurred. Okay, so it's not constant. It's small periods of change. But in either case, and what most scientists think is that it's actually a combination of the two. There's probably small changes occurring, and then there's also rapid bursts depending on a major change in the environment. Okay, so an evolutionary trend does not mean that evolution is goal-oriented. That means that there's not some big, huge, picturesque, I want this organism to be like this at the end. Remember that it's always changing in response to the changes in the environment. So they don't represent perfection. There's still competition. There's still organisms that don't live long enough to reproduce. And then occasionally there's random chance. We talked about how a volcanic eruption occurs, and that's just going to wipe some things out, whether or not they would have been considered fit in their environment before. Okay, so the surviving species still are not perfect. They are still facing challenges in their environment and will still have changes over time. Okay, so that's all your notes for today. Please go back and make sure that you have them all filled in. I would like you to write down 1 or 2 questions about the notes that we took today so that we can talk about them in class tomorrow. So 1 to 2 questions that you have about the notes from this chapter. Thank you.